The anticipated blooms of the daylily are well worth the wait. Tonight we take you to a farm abloom with daylilies in every color of the rainbow. That's straight ahead on this edition of Great Gardening.
Every tree has a moment when it shines.
That's called moneywort or creeping Jenny.
You can go in and do a rejuvenating pruning.
Forage and feed for our native pollinator population.
A garden really gives you peace of mind.
Hello and welcome to Great Gardening. I'm Pamela Fish. We are anxious to show you some gorgeous, very easy care, hardy perennials. But first, with us as always, our perennial experts here to handle your garden predicaments. They are local garden professional Tom Casper and Bob Olin, an area horticulturist and educator. So what's new? What's going on in the gardens?
Well, lots of stuff coming up now, so
Okay.
it's a pretty exciting time. And of course, it sounds like our weather's going to warm up here in the next couple of days. And with all the rain we got earlier in the week, should be good times.
Yeah, I think spring has finally arrived. It seems like it took a while to get here, but it's going to be magnificent at this point on.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to it, as are our phone volunteers, because they are master gardeners too, and we welcome them. The St. Louis County Master Gardeners are here manning the phones, standing by to answer your calls. So give them a try at 218-788-2844, or you can call them toll free at 877-307-8762. You can also email your questions to askgardening@wdse.org. Well, speaking of things coming up in bloom, we got this picture of a yard in eastern Duluth. Judy, our photographer, took the picture yesterday, and this is garnering a lot of attention. Tom, tell us about what's going on here.
Yeah, that's squill or scilla. It's a really easy to care for perennial. It actually spreads by bulb. And here you can see folks are actually using it as an alternate or an alternative to lawn. And it's the beautiful little flowers, and then those stay. The foliage stays green for much of the summer and then will die down over a period of time.
Sure.
But certainly a nice alternative to lawn, and also wonderfully in bloom right now.
Yeah, gorgeous. How long do those blooms stay?
They'll stay for a few weeks, 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks by the time they're all done. So.
All right, very
And a
cool.
sure sign, one of the first to bloom, spring flowering bulbs, and a sure sign that spring is here.
Yep.
All right. Well, tonight we're talking about daylilies, and to clarify, they're not of the same family as other lilies like the Oriental or the Asiatic lily. Bob, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, really, they get their name, the daylily, from the fact that the bloom itself looks very similar to an Asiatic or an Oriental lily, but they're a little bit different. I really think the daylilies are hardier, they're easier to grow. There's just so much variability in terms of color, and they're really low maintenance and will last a long time. The actual Asiatic lilies take a little bit longer. Here's a beautiful example of the daylily Stella d'Oro that adorns many of our landscapes
Right,
here.
you see that one a lot.
Very easy to grow, very hardy, very easy to separate and move and share with your neighbor. And there's so many varieties that you can buy from local sources. We've got a great example tonight.
Mm-hmm. Tom, you've definitely enjoyed the daylilies
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah, I have about somewhere between 60 and 80 varieties
Wow.
in my yard, and wonderful. You mentioned earlier all the colors under the rainbow. They're really nice additions to the garden, and generally nice and easy to take care of, which I like.
Here they are again now. We've got an example of a daylily and an Asiatic lily, and you can see very different.
Very distinctive. When you just look at the foliage, obviously the strap leaves on the daylily, and we've got a bulb underneath here. And we want to thank Gail Coons at Swanson Greenhouse for supplying both of these. So they can be certainly purchased locally. But
Sure.
of course, the daylily, the beautiful bloom here, comes from the fact that the bloom doesn't stay too long, about a day, and they're about done. But plenty of additional blooms, as you can see on the top here,
Yes.
coming along.
Even if they only stay for a day or two, you usually get, well, you can get a number of them.
You get weeks and weeks out of the bloom.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, for more on the daylily, we went to a local source, a woman who built her own daylily farm.
This is DJ's Daylilies. We're in Holyoke, Minnesota, about 30 miles south of Duluth. We've had this farm for about 4 years now, and I always thought it would be fun to have a daylily farm. Well, I think they're great because there's such a variety. There's about 300 different varieties here. Some early bloomers can start late June, sometimes even in May, but that's just a handful. The peak bloom is late July into early August. You can plant them most any time. I sell and dig and divide plants starting around Memorial Day up until Labor Day. Each of these leaves is a fan, and usually you get a double fan like this, and you take it home and plant it. I tell people don't be surprised if they don't bloom the first year after you plant them, or even the second year. Maybe up to 3 years to get established. They tolerate most kinds of soil as long as it's well drained. It's good to deadhead or pull off the spent blooms. If there's a seed pod that forms at the end of the scape, you want to take that off too, because that just takes energy away from the plant being able to grow. Before the winter, I trim the leaves off to about 3-4 inches. There's just a basic daylily, your standard form, if you will. There are a number of them that have ruffles. There are spiders and unusual forms. That's a category where the petals are 3 to 4 times as long as they are wide. So like this one here, this is ruby spider. It's a very large, brilliant spider. That's orange puff, and that is a double. A double means it has twice as many petals and sepals, so there's 12 instead of the traditional 6. And then you have your different sizes of blooms. This one is Bitsy. She's a very tiny one. She's a very long bloomer. This one's Little Wine Cup. She's considered a small bloom, pretty much a solid color, very vigorous grower. And then medium blooms and your very large ones. Some of them have the petals, they kind of curl back. There's a number of them that do that. This would be the eye, and then this is a throat. This is kind of a peachy cream color with a red eye and a yellow-green throat. This is Moonlit Masquerade, and it's got a nice deep purple eye in it. It's very striking. This one's Libya Orange Crush. This is one of the taller varieties. This one is Autumn Wood. It's one of my favorites. It's a little bit later blooming, later in the season, so it can bloom all the way up until September. I have 3 weekends during peak season, usually towards the end of July, beginning of August, and then for a couple weeks. I just think it's just one of the most beautiful things to see. This is my slice of heaven. Yes, it is.
All right, a couple more things we should know about daylilies.
Yeah, and she's got that right. A little slice of heaven.
Yeah, it is.
Right. But,
Beautiful.
daylilies, and she mentioned it too, but you're going to have to keep the deer off them, especially in town. We really battle deer, and they are one of their favorites, unfortunately. And also she mentioned if you do go in and deadhead as they're going and remove this scape after it's all done flowering, it's going to bloom again for you later in the season. So.
Okay, all right.
And the
More
deer have been
blooms.
out, and even if they do mow them back a bit, they're so aggressive that they come from this wonderful fibrous root system. So usually you get by a little later in the season, but if you
Mostly
have to-
full sun, but partial
Yeah,
shade
they'll
is
do
okay.
okay in morning shade and get some afternoon sun.
All right, well, they are gorgeous indeed. And thanks to Diane for showing us her farm. Time for some questions. We're getting some in from Sherry in Kettle River. Is there a particular fertilizer I should use on new lilacs when I plant them?
You know, anytime you put a new plant in the ground, you shouldn't be using any fertilizer except maybe working a little bit of compost into the soil mix as you're planting it. And then after the roots have established for a while, I think, you know, you can just use a little bit of a lawn fertilizer. We typically have a lot of phosphorus in our soils. Just make sure you don't have a weed and feed and make sure that gets watered in. But I'd let it get established for at least 6 weeks before you even think about applying a little fertility. But they're low maintenance, low fertility plants anyway.
All
Yeah,
right.
probably not much of a need to do any additional fertilizing to it. So.
Okay. Marie from Duluth has a mauve hydrangea, 3 gallon. How much lime should I add so that it keeps its color?
Oh, it's a good question because they really do prefer an acidic soil except to push that bloom a little bit. So, you know, she'd probably be better off using just a lime solution, a very fine line that goes into solution and pours that over the top. We really don't want to drastically change permanently change the pH of the soil.
So just a tablespoon or 2 into a gallon, get it diluted, and then pour it around the plant. So.
Okay. And just how many times do we do that?
Well, at least once a year. So.
Okay. All right. Jan from Pengilly is wondering about a good mix for potting soil and what should I use to make my own?
There are 1,000 recipes.
Yeah,
out there.
there's 1,000 recipes, and you know it's a challenge if you're going to make your own to really get a nice light, well-drained or nutrient-rich kind of thing. But if she is certainly using 25 to 30% compost in those potting containers, and then mixing in some of the other things depending on if you're getting vermiculite or perlite and peat and things like that. So
Yeah, you want to think about a couple of things. Good drainage, they all have to have good drainage. And then you really want them to be pasteurized or nearly sterile. And then I like to cut into a little bit of light mineral soil for the trace nutrients. But yet be conscious, you just don't want a garden soil in your containers. You want to use these mixes.
Okay. We've got some raspberry questions, and we've been getting a lot of those already this year. Karen from Duluth wants to know what she should be doing with raspberries this time of year. And, oh, well, do you want to answer that
part's
one
pretty
first?
easy. Go ahead.
well, certainly they're just probably starting to bud out, so there isn't a lot to do at this moment.
Okay.
Wait for those buds to pop, and then really cutting them back to the live growth on the canes, and removing some of the oldest ones if she hasn't done that yet. So.
Mm-hmm. And then a question from Jan in Barnum about the spotted-winged Drosophila, the dreaded little bug that we've been hearing a lot about, and what can you do to get rid of it?
Boy, that's the million-dollar question. As soon as she figures that out, there's a lot of commercial producers would like to know.
Yeah.
It's a pest that we don't have good, easy controls for, even if you wanted to use synthetic insecticides. So I think what you'll do is the fly does attack when the fruit is very, very ripe. So you're going to have to pick very frequently right as that fruit ripens, and then immediately process or immediately freeze. You really can't pick and let them sit on your countertop for a day or two, or you'll be in for a nasty surprise.
Have experienced that.
Speaking from experience.
All right, Lois in Hermantown wants to know, can you transplant rhubarb right now?
Yeah,
Perfect.
it's perfect time to do it. You know,
Okay.
it's just coming up, and certainly in our area, if you get a little south, it might be a little too far along, but in our region, just popping out of the ground, great time.
And rhubarb does like that. It kind of renovates and invigorates and move it in many cases to more sun, and people are surprised how that sun really brings the growth out. Perfect
And
time.
Lois also wants to know when to unwrap tree trunks that have bark damage. Is now the time, or?
Well, if you got a tree wrap on there that's in contact with the bark, we want that off right now. We don't want to trap any moisture behind that, so take it off immediately. Goes on very late in the fall, comes off very early in the spring.
Okay. Let's try and get just a couple more in here before we move on. Jerry from Duluth has a flowering crabtree with a fungus. What chemical can I use to get rid of the fungus?
Well, we'd kind of like to know what kind of fungus,
Yeah.
but we got a fungus among
Yeah.
us, huh? You know, we do we do have several fungi. If it's on the bark, I wouldn't worry about it. But if he's talking about some of the scab that impacts a lot of our ornamental crabs, I'll use the name brand Orthos Daconil or chlorothalonil is the product, but that doesn't have a label for edibles. So you have to be conscious of that. But certainly for ornamentals, and that product has to go on early. So we've got a good fungicide that will be effective, but you got to wait until it leaves out and then stay away from the edibles with that product.
And certainly moving into the future, good cleanup in the fall, getting as much of those fungal spores out of or around that tree into the future years will be also a good practice. And also, it's too late now, but also pruning that tree to open up some airflow into it will help reduce that impact of the fungus as well.
And you know, Tom, we've been talking a little bit about conditions warming, certainly, and getting us through the winter. And people should look for some of the Zone 4 flowering crabs, because many of the new introductions, they're not as hardy as some of our traditional Zone 3, but certainly that's one thing they're looking for is fungal resistance or scab resistance in the new introductions. So they're worth taking a good look at.
Okay, speaking of warming, is it too late to start pepper or tomato seeds?
You know, at this particular point, you're going to have to push them a little bit.
That's from Dan in Duluth.
Yeah, I would say if you got the seed, I would start them, but you're probably about 3 weeks late. But that being said, find a nice warm spot, push them along with a little bit of additional
Where is a
nitrogen.
nice warm spot?
South of here.
Right.
Okay.
Wait, in early June, there will be a good warm spot
All right.
someplace.
All right. Okay. We'll have more questions coming up a little bit later. But this week's tour takes us to a nearby residence where you will find the front yard bordered in flowers, but out back, a very different scene.
My name is Barb Russ, and this is my garden right below 4th Street in the Congdon neighborhood. And it was already a pretty established garden by the former homeowner. So it gave me, something to start on in terms of identifying what she did have back there and changes that I would want to make. I do really like the gardens that I've established here along the front walkway. The first thing when you come home you see, and the first thing you come out the door. So we enjoy this quite a lot. Delphiniums here that are various shades of blues and purples, and I do like blue and purple. And so we have a lot of that, and I of course like to contrast it with the yellow, and the coreopsis is very pretty for that purpose. I decided to do it after seeing some boulevard gardens in St. Paul. I learned that there were some perennials that weren't going to do real well up there because of the, plowing and the sand and the salt and so on and so forth. But some years I've had really good luck, and others, not so much. But I do enjoy it, and I do get compliments from people now and then too, because they enjoy it as well. Those black bags that are specific for growing potatoes, as well as other things, you could really use it for just about anything, but those I've been very successful. And this is the garden where things are usually safe from critters, especially deer. Let's go in here and see what's blooming and growing. In this raised bed are tomato plants, a variety of tomato plants, and then I've also got some green peppers over there and some carrots I seeded. And then I have cucumbers, a couple different varieties, and pole beans. These are, I think, butternut squash. I've left all of this open, just a place for them to sprawl. Hopefully they will. It's a nice spot. I have found people back here because they thought it was a park, and that was before the additional fencing was put up by the county when the old 80-year-old culvert collapsed. And it's no longer easy for people to just walk in here and think it's a park. I'm flattered that they think it's a park. That's pretty old. I would guess that the prior owner planted that tree. But one thing that's really interesting about this property, of course, is the creek. At the back of our house, we don't have a backyard. It's a pretty steep downhill, about 30 feet down to what is usually called Oregon Creek. There's something about the sound of water, and when you can have the windows open, and a few weeks out of the summer in Duluth, we enjoy that a lot. Well, what I really like about gardening, number one, it's outside. It's just a good way to be outside and, accomplish something and have it enjoyable as well. Well, we sure enjoyed Barb's place. Barb's a city councilor in Duluth, and
quite a gardener as well.
Yeah, and her husband, Neil, is quite a baker.
Oh, is he?
Yeah,
You're like that? You
Yeah,
guys,
we bake
You
together.
get baked goods from him or you bake together?
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks to Barb for the tour. We really appreciate it. We're going to get back to some questions now. And you guys know anything about growing artichokes?
Got to start from transplants, certainly, but can be grown in the area. I've grown some.
Well,
I need
Luann
every
in
day.
Ashland got some green globe artichoke seeds from Seed Savers Exchange that are said to be hardy to zone 3 and is wondering about success growing these in the Northland or what advice you might have.
Starting them early, and as we're seeing our climate warm a little bit, the chances of getting those to survive or getting them to the ripened stage are greater. So planting them in a warm, protected location and getting through those first frosts that we see sometimes early so we can get them later into the season.
Started 3 weeks ago when you started.
3
your
weeks
peppers.
ago.
Yeah.
And she also says that on the package it talks about vernalization. Can you guys explain that?
Well, that's, they respond and they bulb relative to day length. And I believe they're a longer day or shorter day plant. So as the day length declines, the bulbs begin to set up for them.
Okay. Terry has a large old white popple tree. Do you say popple or poplar?
Poplar.
I say popple. Okay, and she's wondering, she had it removed from the yard and is wondering how long to wait to put something in its place, and can you recommend some sugar maples that do well here?
Oh, sure. Well, how long it's going to take, they've got this wonderful root system that they regenerate from, so she's going to have to clip those continually, but I think they can certainly get going now if she likes sugar maples. We've got, several real good varieties that are in the trade, and most of them, as long as the site has reasonably good drainage, I think she would be fine
Yeah,
with.
and Green Mountain is a variety that she should look for that's
Okay.
really popular and has seemed to have done pretty well in our climate. So.
All right, there you go. Marion Buell has a 5-year-old linden tree with gall mites. She cut off and raked up, threw away the leaves last fall, plans to spray insecticidal soap before it buds. Is there anything else she should do?
Well, I think the cleanup in the fall is a good thing. And really, there's probably not a lot to worry about. It's not going to negatively impact the tree. It does make the leaves look a little different or interesting, but certainly not going to lead to the decline or the destruction of the tree. So.
And they're caused by either mites or stinging insects, and that is a lot dependent upon the population that year. So you can have a real heavy gall formation year with lots of insects or mites, and then the next year, depending on the weather patterns, it's not near as severe. So a lot of that's going to be temperature dependent, but as Tom says, it's not going to hurt the tree at all.
Okay. Mary from Duluth says, if I buy ramps, wild leeks at the store, can I plant them in my home garden?
We have a lot of wild leek in the area, so I think she could if she wants to go right now with them. I think she should give them a try.
Okay. Tom, this is for you from Renee in Lakeside. She has some butterbur and it is spreading aggressively. What can I do?
Enjoy it. No, it's one of my favorite perennials. Folks are struggling to find things that deer don't like, that do well in damp, heavy, wet, dark soils in shady locations. Butterbur is one of those perennials. The leaves, as it mature, will get about 3 feet around. They're easy to control. They're going to send up a shoot in another spot in the garden. You can go in and cut that off, or in 15 minutes keep it to the size you want it and sit back and enjoy it. It's one of my favorites. So.
Okay, great. Here's a daylily question. Linda from Duluth is wondering, are native pollinators attracted to Stelladora or other daylilies?
That's a good question. I don't think that there's any reason why they wouldn't be. They've got the stigma, the style of pollen, and so forth. They may not have all the nectar they'd want, but certainly,
yeah. And I think that's a great question. But really, any plants that we can plant in our yard that produce flowers have an opportunity to have a positive impact on our native pollinators. So.
Flowers with the actual full components we've got in this incredible age we live in. We've got some flowers where they've basically hybridized out the reproductive components. So we really have to have nectar and we have to have pollen, which are the food sources for these. So some of these old-fashioned plants, that's the natural way, and they're best suited for pollinators.
Okay. Gosh, Judy's given me the high sign, but I think that Nancy had asked this before and we didn't get to it. So she sprayed Roundup on Snow on the Mountain. Now it has new sprouts. Can I spray again? What can I plant in that area? That Snow on the Mountain is tough to get rid of.
Well, and Roundup or any of the other glyphosate products should have a pretty good impact on it, and a repeated application if she wants to remove it that way, or hand digging it. They're pretty shallow rooted and pretty easy if you're going into the top 3 or 4 inches to get most of it out. So.
Okay, great. Well, we want to show you now some familiar flowers and vegetables, but they were not grown locally, but raised by a local military man stationed in the Persian Gulf region last winter. Ryan Swanson shared these pictures of plants he grew in the Middle East using soil from Germany. Ryan nurtured herbs and tomatoes. He also grew sunflowers and rudbeckia. Wow, we think that's pretty cool. Thanks, Ryan, for providing the photos, and also thank you for your service. That's really interesting, I think, in that climate, to be able to grow those things that we grow here.
We live in a global age, don't we?
Yeah.
He comes from northern Minnesota, and his soil is from Germany, and he's growing them in the Middle East.
That's right.
There we
That's
go.
right.
And sending the photos back to us here.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan, for those. And for those of you growing great plants and flowers in the Northland, please share your photos with Great Gardening by emailing them to greatgardening@wdse.org, or you can send them to the station at 632 Niagara Court. Also, we want to remind you to be sure and check out our website for more information for upcoming garden-related events. Plus, you can see past episodes of the program there. That's wdse.org/gardening. Okay, well, Bob Ola and Tom Casper, that's it. We're done already, and thank you so much for great advice.
Great weekend. I think this is the weekend that things are going to finally open up for folks, and you can get out there finally. That first weekend, most of the greenhouses, including our great sponsors, are with us and are open this weekend. So the season has officially begun, Tom.
That's right.
All right.
Get out and enjoy it.
Okay, will do. Thanks so much. A big thank you to our phone volunteers from the St. Louis County Master Gardeners. And from all of us here at Great Gardening, thanks for watching and enjoy the garden.